Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening. I am Fatima Jad. I'm going to be your moderator for today's session, inshallah. And welcome, everyone, joining us live and joining us physically in Sharq Forum. I wish you have a quiet pleasure and ready to engage in what we promise to be an incredibly insightful and inspiring session. In our Diwan, I extend a warm welcome to our guest and our amazing professor with us today. It's an honor to introduce Dr. Rana, a leader, a scientist, an educator, and a social entrepreneur. Dr. Rana, she's a professor of molecular biology at Hashemite University in Jordan, and her research focus on epigenetic and trauma biometrics among refugees. Dr. Dajani plays a very significant role in developing stem cell legislation in a region, and she serves in the UN Council and scientific boards. She's also currently the president of Society of the Advocacy of Science and Technology in the Arab world, and she have held a very amazing roles seated at Harvard, Yale, MIT, and Cambridge. And she is a very significant individual in our region. And she did founded a very amazing innovation that was called We Love Reading. And it created more than 8,000 libraries around 70 countries, empowering change maker through books and stories. Her work reflects the core tone of our theme today: storytelling, advocacy, and action shaping global change. Please join me having a very warm welcome to Dr. Rana Dajani together. Dr. Rana, you have approximately 16 minutes. Feel free to start.
All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. I'm actually here to learn as much as everybody else. So I expect you all to write down your comments, your questions, but most importantly, your critiques, because it is critique that allows us to grow and learn from each other. So please make sure you have all those questions coming so that I get the chance to learn as well as all of us. I'm very happy to be here in Turkey, in Istanbul. It's a beautiful country, and the way the young people are changing it is a huge inspiration. And I'm glad to be here at Al-Sharq, and I was inspired by passing through the hallway of the Idrisi map of the world. That's amazing, right? Because it gives us another framing of how to see the world. We all grew up in our lifetimes, and even in the past couple of 100 years, that the framework of the world was all Western. And hence the map is a representation of that framing, of that perspective. That north is Europe and south, what's up is the north and what's down is the south. Yet the map of Idrisi is actually upside down. Yeah. Right, which speaks to who owns the world, where is the source of hegemony around the world, and makes you think of a whole different way of looking at the world. And that's actually one of the hallmarks of being a scientist. Being a scientist is having the capacity to think outside the box, to see the world in a different perspective, to challenge the status quo, to question everything. And so one of the guidelines for me is a quote from a Nobel Prize physicist who I have to give you some homework because I'm an educator. And what he said is a scientist is somebody who sees what everybody sees but thinks what no one has thought. Okay? And I don't think it's just the hallmark of a scientist. I think that's the hallmark of being human, that we are all different. We are born, each one of us has a different DNA than anyone else who has ever lived, who lives today, who will be born in the future. And so you come with a very new, different perspective, and hence you will see the world in a different way. And that's why you will come with new questions, new solutions, new ways of seeing the world. And that's very, very important for us to be able to move forward in the world. And that's diversity. And we need to celebrate diversity. And that's part of who we are from our tradition as Muslims. Diversity is central in who we are and how we look at the world. So with that, I mean, thank you very much for the introduction.
You're welcome.
But I'd like to own my introduction.
Okay, go ahead.
So I like to talk about myself and say that I play multiple roles in my life. And when people talk about roles, they talk about different hats. That's the Western way of doing it. I don't wear a hat, I wear a scarf, so I talk about my 5 scarves. And the first one that I always start with is that I'm a mother, I'm a parent. I have 4 children. And to me, that's the most important role any human being can play in the world, because it's bringing up the next generation of humans. What can be more important than that? Yet we don't talk about it, we don't mention it in any of the big public events, conferences, or when you talk about yourself. You don't talk about being a parent. You take it for granted when it is the most important thing. And believe me, I'm sure many of you have children. It's tough. It's hard. And you make mistakes and you learn. And when you grow older like me and my kids are all grown up, I look back and say, I wish I did it this way and this way and this way and this way. But that's why we need to talk about it, so we can learn from each other. My second scarf is I'm an educator. So I was a school teacher for 10 years. I taught from 1st grade to 12th grade. And again, I have the utmost respect for teachers. And I think that's the second most important role any human being can play. Because the children, if they're not at home with the parents, they're at school with the teachers. So the role of a teacher in molding and shaping and inspiring the next generation cannot be underestimated. So if you can stand up, believe me, in front of a class of 5th graders, you can do anything. Because they know everything about you. They know if you're really threatening them or not, etc. So we need more teachers, and we need to respect our teachers because they are the ones who are bringing up the next generation. My third scarf is I'm a scientist, as Fatima mentioned. And I love science. I love to try to understand the world around me, nature around me. And this is something that we are born with, this curiosity, this need to ask a question, to try to explain the world around us. And we have it in the Quran, right? There's so many verses that inspire us and call us and actually sometimes order us to use our minds, to look around us, to be inspired by nature, to ask questions. So I get a kick and a thrill of trying to understand how molecules interact, how cells communicate. And maybe throughout my talk, I'll mention a little bit of my science, how it has inspired me to understand human behavior, understand who we are in this world, especially today, in what's happening today in terms of politics, global world order, and many other things. My fourth scarf is I'm a social innovator, as Fatima mentioned, and I founded an innovation, a program called We Love Reading, which is about changing mindsets through reading to nurture change makers. And I will elaborate on that as well as I tell my story. My fifth scarf, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to keep you guessing because then you will keep on listening to me, right? Because you want to know what the fifth scarf is. Or I will invite you to read my book. Can you guess what my book's name is? It's called 5 Scarves. Doing the impossible. If we can reverse self-hate, why can't we redefine success? And you don't have to buy it. You can just email me and I'll send you a PDF copy in English. And the Arabic one, you can buy it because it's not expensive at all. But you can read it and figure out what's my fifth scarf, unless you can figure it out by the end of my talk. All right, so let's see who can figure it out. And I want to, first of all, take a point and say I'm speaking in English, although I want to speak in Bil Arabi, because our identity is our language, and what shapes us are words in our minds and how we express them. But because I want to reach a wider audience of not just Muslims around the world, but humans around the world, because we're all connected, humanity, I'm using English. But I'm using it not out of any sense of pride. I would rather use Arabic, and then somebody figures out a translation. So I want just to put that as a disclaimer. Now, as Fatima mentioned, I'm a molecular biologist, and when you are an expert in molecular biology, that's connected to evolution. So I can present myself as somebody who looks at evolution, biological evolution, to try to understand not just who we are as human beings, but also how we behave in society. So one of the things I've learned from evolutionary biology is that as humans have been evolving in at least the last 200,000 years, at some point in time, I believe there were two groups of people. There was a group of people who sat around the fire and told stories, and there was another group of people who frowned upon those telling stories and accused them of wasting their time. Can you guess which group actually survived? Was it the storytellers or the ones who didn't like to be storytellers? It's the storytellers, of course, because that's how we learn about each other, about past experiences, about what to do and what not to do. Maybe you can say from that gossiping is good because you're learning. I don't know. Well, it hasn't been, it's still amongst us. We still gossip, so there must be some good in it. Right? So storytelling is important. And in the spirit of evolution and storytelling, I'm going to share a number of stories because we learn through stories. Look at all the Quran, the Bible, and all the religious books. They're all full of stories because we learn through stories. Well, if you want to teach your kids something, you don't tell them, don't do this and don't do that. You tell them a story. If there's a proverb in Arabic, بحكيكي يا جارة اسمعي يا كنة. Have you heard of that? Like I tell the neighbor so my daughter-in-law can listen to the message. And I'm sure there are similar sayings in other languages around the world. So storytelling is important, and that's why I'm the storyteller. And that's why we needed to change the narrative of the world, as the title of my talk is about. So with that, I'm going to start by I'm going to go through a series of points, and this is going to be a stream of conscious in a way, from sharing with you what I've been thinking about for the past, I want to say, 2 to 3 years. And hopefully this will inspire you to share your thoughts so that we can all grow together and move forward in this very complicated world. First of all, I draw from my research and from nature. So looking at human nature, one of the questions we ask ourselves is, what are those traits that allowed us to survive as a species? If I ask you, the typical answer is, oh, we're more intelligent. Well, sorry to tell you, that's not the reason. There are other animals that are equally intelligent. So it's not intelligence. Okay, so let's put that aside. Then what is it? What is it that makes us, that allowed us to survive as a species? Well, from my research, I've identified 3 things. 3 traits. The first one is curiosity, that we are very, very curious. We love to ask questions. And if you know the proverb, curiosity killed the cat, forget about that one. Cancel it. Curiosity is important. Yes, we need to keep asking questions all the time. And there is no red tape for any question, because we presume that the intention of the question is because I really want to know. So we need to give the benefit of the doubt that when I ask a question, I really want to know. And as I explain these 3, let's say, traits that I suggest that are the reason we survived as a species, I'm going to tie them to our philosophy as Muslims. In Islam, we are encouraged to use our minds to ask questions, right? Because when the verses tell us, tafakkar, yani use your mind, when you're using your mind and looking at nature, then you start asking questions. Why is the sky blue? Why is the water moving this way? Why? So these questions are actually being fueled, driven by our curiosity, which is part of how we evolved as a species. And in Islam, we are not just encouraged to ask, we are told specifically that there is no red tape for any question. All right, and I'll give you an example. Although I've heard many students who come to me and tell me, oh, doctora, but there's, certain questions you should never ask. All right? I think, who told you that? And then if we go back to the Quran, which is our guide, I don't know how many of you know the Baqarah, Surah Al-Baqarah, but in Surah Al-Baqarah, there's a verse that says, I'll say it in Arabic and then paraphrase in English. It's not a literal translation, so to be accurate. When Ibrahim asks Allah, Arini kayfa tuhyi al-mawta, show me how you bring the dead back to life. What does Allah say? Okay, first of all, imagine the scenario. This is Ibrahim, a human being, talking to Allah. Yani Allah, we don't have to talk who is Allah, what is Allah, what are his attributes. But they're having a conversation, okay? And Ibrahim is asking God for proof. Like, I want to know. Shouldn't he believe? Isn't that Allah? Like, how could he even question Allah? And what did Allah respond? He didn't say, no, that's a red question. You can't ask. Kif? Huh, this is impossible. He said, أولم تؤمن? You don't believe? He said, Bala, yes, I believe. ولكن ليطمئن قلبي, but I want to know more, to feel more, يعني يطمئنان, to have more proof, or to feel more comfortable, satisfied. Again, we're all paraphrasing here, just to be accurate, because as scientists, you have to be very specific. And for literally translation of the Quran, we have to be specific. And then what does Allah tell him? He doesn't tell you have to believe blindly. First, he didn't refuse him the question. And second, he didn't say you have to believe blindly. He proceeded to give him physical evidence, right? And he says, خُذْ أَرْبَعَةً مِنَ الطَّيْرِ وَصُرُّهُنَّ, etc., etc. And he tells, get birds, cut them up, put them on the mountain, etc., etc. So he actually was telling him the scientific method, right? That if you have a question, you need to go make an experiment, have physical proof to prove it. And this is Allah telling Ibrahim, not to human beings, and not to any human beings. So to me, this is an inspiration that part of being a human is you ask questions. And Islam, as a philosophy, calls us and actually to ask questions, and says there's no red tape to any question. If Ibrahim can ask Allah, then we can ask anything, right? And that the answer can never be, you have to believe blindly. That can never be the answer. The answer has to be proof and logic and a conversation and a dialogue until you are satisfied. Because what did Ibrahim said? لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي, until I am satisfied. And everybody's level of satisfaction is different. You a small answer or a simple answer may be enough for you. For somebody, no, they want to go deeper, and that's okay. Let them go deeper until they feel satisfied. And that's the reason we are alive today, because that gives us a reason to wake up in the morning, to keep asking, to follow our curiosity, right? That gives us the spice of life, the zest of life. And if all the answers were already in front of us, why would we wake up every morning? There's no point. But every new human being, as we said in the beginning, is a new person with a new question, right? And a new way of looking at an answer that may have satisfied people in the past, but doesn't satisfy me today. And that's okay. So every person is a new journey in this world. And wow, how beautiful, how wonderful, how amazing to embark on that journey. So that's one of the tenets or traits of why we survived as a species, and why we need it today more than ever if we want to survive. The second one is that we as a species survive because we are problem solvers. We solve problems all the time. Your grandmother is the best problem solver in the world. So you don't need to have an accreditation from any university to be a problem solver. You're just human. If you're born into this world, you're a problem solver. You survived because you're a problem solver. It's innate. الفطرة, it's part of who you are. And I'll give you an example. If you're going to have lunch at your grandmother's house on Friday, tomorrow's Friday, it's a holiday. You're going to go have lunch. Your grandmother's preparing for you your favorite dish. I'm from Palestine, so maqlube or مسخن, I don't know, what's your favorite dish? As she's getting ready with the cooking, the stove stops working. She tries to put it on, there's no fire. What does she do? She says, She goes to the gas bottle, right? And then she tries to move the gas bottle to check if there's any gas. This is scientific method. Honestly, what happened? She observed something. The observation, the fire is not turning on. She came up with a hypothesis. What's a hypothesis? That the stove is not working because the gas bottle is empty. That's a hypothesis. Then what do you do with the hypothesis? You test it. So she goes and tests it. She shakes the gas bottle. If the gas bottle is full, that means her hypothesis was wrong. So she has to go back and make more observation, come up with a new hypothesis. Maybe it's the pipe that connects the gas bottle with the stove that's blocked. New hypothesis. She tests it, right? She cleans the pipe. I don't know what she does. Okay, it works. So at that point of time, on Friday morning, on July 18, tomorrow, the reason the stove didn't work was because the pipe was blocked. So that's her conclusion from her hypothesis. And that conclusion is only correct for those set of circumstances: the time, the date, her kitchen, her stove. If you change the kitchen, the stove, the date, it doesn't mean necessarily that the conclusion will be the same. It may be different. Hence, and that's the scientific method. So your grandma is actually a scientist, like all of us, like anybody who is born as a human being, and that's how we survived. And this scientific method of thinking, first I said it's innate, it's born with us. Second, it's part of our Islamic philosophy. Again, back to Ibrahim and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the verse when he says, go, take the bird, cut it up. It's the scientific method. So the scientific method has been part of our philosophy. And if you want to see it in experimentation, we know one of the first scholars in Islam was Ibn al-Haytham, who actually wrote about it and called it the scientific method and explained how he used that kind of thinking inspired by Islam and inspired by his innate humanity to do his experiments. Okay, and keep this thought because I'm going to talk about this later. Now, the third trait is that we survive because we are social creatures. We are social creatures. We cannot survive alone. We survive in a community, in a society. That's why we survived, right? Not because we're smart. Again, it's not because we're smart. We're social. So if we lose this social connectedness, we're going to lose our capacity to survive. And we see this throughout our history from 200,000 years up onwards, how the reason we survived is because we have family, we have extended family, and you can see it in children. In humans, contrary to other organisms, we have a very long childhood, very long. The reason is because the child, as he or she are born, need to be taken care of by the family. So they learn from their parents, they learn from their grandparents, their aunts, the cousins, the extended family, how to survive. What are the social cues, the practices, the culture, the habits, the do's, the don'ts? They learn it through that extended childhood. Therefore, the importance of social interaction cannot be underestimated. And you can see today that this social connectedness is under threat. In multiple ways, but I'll just mention a few. One is Western civilization and the focus on individualism, right? It's only me. Well, sorry, you could survive maybe now, but in a few hundred years, you won't be able to survive because we survived because we are a community. And when we don't practice that, the consequences will follow later. And it will be detrimental to us as a species. Because we've been working on this for 200,000 years, 100 or 200 years of being individuals is not going to change it. Okay? The second is technology, right? We don't talk to each other anymore. We're always on our phones. We don't sit, we don't talk. And from a lot of scientific experiments have shown that for a child's brain to grow healthy, not just in terms of cognition and understanding and doing good at school, in terms of social interaction and understanding how to communicate and care and love, only happens when you have a human-human interaction. If you don't have human-human interaction, what happens to the brain? The brain stops growing. It atrophies. And this is based on research. So I'll mention quickly. There was a group of children in Romania during the Soviet Union's communism. Many parents disappeared. And so they took a lot of these children and put them in orphanages. Now, these orphanages had food, shelter. These children their diapers were changed. They were warm. But they were missing one thing, which was human interaction. Nobody played with them. Nobody talked to them. And when they scanned their brains compared to children who were living in a family, the brains were smaller. And if they didn't save those children, rescue them, and put them in a family, those changes became permanent as they grew up. Okay, not just that you couldn't interact, but they couldn't, let's say, conduct their lives in a normal way. So social is important. Spending time with our children is important. And today what we see in the way the world is moving forward and the way we define success, it's how much money you own, how many hours you're spending in your work. Your impact is measured in, are you changing the economy? and nobody's looking at the children, right? And they're the future. So we need to reassess our values. What is it? What are our priorities if we want to survive as a species, right? If we want to survive as a species. And going back to Islam and our philosophy and Islam, it's all about family, caring of others, right? We see كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. Everyone is a guardian. You are responsible for who is around you, your family, your extended family. You must not be hungry if the seventh neighbor is hungry, right? We need to take care of each other. And this is part of how we will survive because it's part of our DNA. So any new thing, new in evolution, when you say new, even if it's 200 years, it's new, it's going to go away. It won't survive. Those who practice it will die, will fizzle out because that you can't survive in that way. So hence evolution, those three traits of what allowed us to survive as a species, as humans, are innate, fitra, and they're part of what Islam has taught us from philosophy. And maybe we can find also some of these traits in other ancient cultures. If you look at ancient Chinese, you find these same things. If you look at Native Americans, you find these same traits of family, of taking care of nature, and so on. And this perspective of the world, of looking at the world, that we are part of the world, is the Islamic tradition and the ancient one is that we are part of nature. While the Western civilization has come up with an interpretation of the world of hegemony. I want to dominate nature. I want to control nature. I want to divide and conquer nature. All right. And even if that started as a way to understand nature, today, even as a scientist, we find that limiting. People today are talking about interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. You can't understand anything alone. You have to be in a team. You have to have people from all different disciplines so you can really push the limit of science. So we're coming back full circle to realize that we need this new way of looking at the world, on one hand. On the other hand, with all that's happening with climate change and the exploitation of nature to the extreme, that today everybody's yelling, oh my God, what are we going to do? It also came from the way we look at Earth, as that Earth is there just for us as humans to serve us. That is not right. That's not right from let's say from a nature perspective. That's not right from an Islamic perspective, right? Or ancient culture perspective. We are part of nature. When Allah in the Quran says, "Al-insan khalifa ala al-ard," yani you are a care. Khalifa means to care, to be the caregiver, not the dominator. And so, how we interpret language and how we understand what Islam is very important. So this is my first part. Now, this leads me to talk about, which I've already started talking about, the West and the hegemony of the West and the philosophy of the West and how it has kind of sneaked up on us, and we incorporated it into our own thinking that is civilization. So let's talk about civilization. What is civilization? We read about civilization. We talk about civilization. We quote civilization. But if you really dig deep, there's two levels. First, you have the West. And when I say the West, I'm talking about Europe and the extension of the United States. And what I mean is the philosophy, the science that is kind of shaping the world today. It's the basis of politics. It's the basis of humanities. It's the basis of technology. This is what I'm talking about, just to be clear what I'm talking about. The basis of that goes back plus minus 500 years, which is the beginning of colonization. All right? What happened is that Europe was in the Dark Ages because they were controlled by the church. And then suddenly when they woke up and realized that the church was controlling them, taking their money, stopping them from reading, stopping them from thinking, in the name of religion, they said, we don't want religion, no religion, because that controls us, stops us from thinking. We want to be free. And that is what they called the Enlightenment for them. We have to be careful who's the one becoming enlightened. And that's when they they became enlightened because they left their religion. But that's part of it. The other part is that what happened is that they started controlling and exploiting other cultures, populations, societies around the world. And that was the beginning of colonization, of African countries, Asian countries, Europe, England, going to the North America, South America, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and conducting the most barbaric atrocities in the world. And we don't have to go into those. You know, they've genocided all the native people in those two continents. And then what the genocides that happened in Africa, the atrocities in India, and other countries around the world. And we all know our history, right? In our part of the world. This is civilization. Okay? This is what they call civilization. And that's important to remember. Because it was they used that version of civilization to control people and to put them down and to cross out, eliminate anything that was not their version of civilization. So if it wasn't in English, it didn't count, or European language. It didn't exist. It didn't count. If it wasn't the Western way of thinking, it didn't count. And hence, there was this separation of the world. And this civilized versus uncivilized, it's what gave them the excuse, even for their own people, to control and kill, because this was the source of dehumanization. That these are not human, they're not civilized, they're barbaric, they're whatever you want to call them. Not just that, they used religion as an excuse. Whether it was the Bible tells us that we need to civilize the barbarians. So again, this dehumanization. And I'm calling it these names, these terms, because in the past, nobody used those terms, right? They were using more gentler terms, so they could get away with what they're doing. But today we need to call the words with what they really are. Call a spade a spade. Now, the extension of, or let's say maybe the worst part of the genocides and the exploitation and the colonizing was the slavery that happened in North America and South America. And the exploitation of humans and the trafficking of humans that happened from Africa to both Americas. Okay, that was the epitome of cruelty, barbaric, all in the name of civilization, and all in the name of religion. Like you're a good Christian, then you do that. Now, in the name of religion, because Christianity is a religion. We believe in Christianity. We believe in Jesus. We believe in Judaism. We have nothing against the religion. It is how people use religion to exploit and dehumanize. And that's what happened. So all of this is civilization. And therefore, we need to call them what they are. And remember that these kinds of tropes, this kind of thinking, has not disappeared. It is still there. It has been covered. Now, it's no longer, there's no colonial powers going into Africa taking advantage of people that way, but we have other subtle ways, indirect ways, culturally, educationally, scientifically, in terms of politics, in many, many ways still exist today. And we need to call them out so that we see them clearly. So how, for example, I'll give a few examples. For example, I'm a scientist, so we publish our work in scientific journals. And if any of you is an academic or a scientist, one of the biggest journals in the scientific world is the journal Science. And it's produced by the American Association for Advancement of Science. Well, this prestigious journal last year produced a special issue talking, we want to decolonize science. Alhamdulillah, good. All right. So the first paragraph in the journal, in that special issue says, we want to decolonize science, and we're talking about modern science, the science that discovered the scientific method. What? You're already saying the wrong sentence. They're saying we're talking modern science. Modern science is the one that discovered the scientific method. We just said earlier that the scientific method, first of all, it's innate in all of us. But if we want to go back to who's the first one who coined it, it was Ibn al-Haytham. When? Like, I think around 800 years after Christ. Okay? And they're telling me, no, scientific method is something that was created in the last 200, 300 years. So I send them an email, say, this is not acceptable. I mean, you're talking about decolonization, and the first sentence you write is actually a misinformation and an example of colonization. And they said, oh, yeah, we're sorry, we didn't mean it that way. And these are scientists, by the way, right? So this is not like, oh, you know, some reporter who doesn't know accuracy, etc. Another example, Nature, which is the second most important journal in science, a few years ago, ran a special issue on the history of medicine. All right, it was great. History of a nice timeline, starting with Greek, China, and then 17th century Europe.
600 years in the middle.
Oh, and then continue. I said, wait a minute. Like, is this real? Like nothing from the Islamic civilization, who discovered, you know, all the surgeons, every tool, most every tool that surgeons use today were developed, invented by the Muslims. Optics for ophthalmology, the circulatory system, the heart. It wasn't discovered by Harvey. It was discovered by Zahiri as an Islamic scholar. So I write a letter, again, email to the editors. Excuse me, you're missing a whole section of history. And this is science, right? These are scientists who claim accuracy, critical references, be accurate, don't miss anything, etc. And they said, oh, maybe there was not enough space in the page. يعني شو بقولوا عذرك محمل ذنب؟
Oh, there's 600 years in the middle.
Maybe there was, and I said, no, it's not about not having space in the page. They totally ignored it. All right, so again, this colonization, this civilized versus uncivilized, is clearly there still. And there are many other stories. I'll give you the last one. Again, 2 years ago, I was in New York City, and there was this big meeting. A very famous historian of science who has a PhD in physics, with the editor of a prestigious journal, and they're exploring the mathematization of the universe. Okay, fancy term. And this scientist comes up and says, "Oh, there's many prestigious mathematicians in the audience." Okay, and we're in New York City, so I'm assuming Columbia, others, etc., in the room. And she says, and the guy asked her, the editor asked her, so, tell us some history of mathematics. So she talks about the Greek, you know, trigonometry, Euclidean geometry, whatever, two-dimensional geometry, etc. And then she says, and then nothing happened till the Enlightenment in the 17th century. And he asked her, nothing? And she says, nothing. And I'm just like, you know when your jaw drops? It's like, what? Okay, from the circulatory system, maybe they made a mistake. They couldn't read the Arabic, but this is math. Algorithms. Aslan, the word comes from Al-Khwarizmi. And nobody in the audience said a word. Okay, so definitely, and they were so proud. Oh, wow. We are the ones who saved the world. After the Greek, the whole world was asleep until we, the Europeans, came, woke up everybody, and continued the math story. So we definitely, whether they are really ignorant, they choose to be ignorant, there is a problem of civilized and uncivilized, and we need to decolonize our minds. Okay? And hence, I want to stop saying I went to Harvard, and I went to MIT, and I went to Yale, and I went to Cambridge, because those are just universities who have smart people. We have universities here who have smart people. And we need to be proud of who we are and where we are. And stop using those names to prove ourselves. Like, oh, nobody's going to listen to me unless I come from Harvard? No, we should listen to each other because of who we are. So we need to have a movement of decolonizing our minds that we don't have to be at Harvard, MIT. And I'll tell you the truth, I was there, and you have people, very mediocre people, who do research that could be done at any university. It's just because you have MIT, then it must be different. It must be special. And it becomes special because you think it is special. Yeah. So every one of you has the brains and the capacity and the creativity and the innovation to come up with a fantastic idea. And that's why you don't need the credentials of a Western university or a Western institution that has already proved themselves to be lacking of any virtue. Speaking of what's happening in Gaza, right? All these universities, it was the students who stood up and made the encampments going against their administrators. But the university administrators, did they support them? We know the history, we know the stories. Is that a university I'm proud to be affiliated with? No. Right? We should be proud to be affiliated with universities, institutions who stand up for values, because that's who we are as humans, and that's how we are going to survive as a species. So, imperialism, supremacy are very much alive, but they're just covered with a veneer of which has tricked us all to follow. Okay, and we need to be aware. That's why we need to build our own institutions and to be proud of them. It'll take time. That's okay. We have all the time in the world, but it has to start by us believing in ourselves, because that's the problem. It's us believing in ourselves. Now, I'm going to shift from science, because I'm a scientist, and talk a little bit about politics. In the same as we talked about how the scientists and the scientific world is talking all about Western enlightenment, we always hear of human rights, the United Nations, international law, right? All this was created when? After World War II, right? 1948, 45 ended, World War II ended. And I have a big problem with the word world war. Like, whose world? Whose world? It was Europe. But it became the world. We have to, but it's the world because they are the ones being killed. What about all of us being killed in the last 100 years? We don't count. Again, we don't count. So even the word world war, I have a problem with. So World War II ended. The nations came together. Who were those nations that came together? Again, the Europeans, to create a world order, because what happened is that Germany threatened England and the Commonwealth and France. So they were scared from each other. So they need to create a world order to control themselves. They weren't trying to control, to help us. They were trying to help only each other. Because if you go back to all these international law, and this is something I didn't know until I sat with a fantastic person. Her name is Shahid Hammouri. Everybody needs to follow her, learn about her, invite her to give a speech. Shahid Hammouri is a young Jordanian. She went to the university in Jordan, studied law. Then she did her PhD. Now she's a professor at the University of Kent in the UK. She has taught me and many others that international law was built to serve Europe and America. That was it. The laws were put for that. Now, when do you know this? Is when they're put to the test. Okay, that's when when you put them to the test, then you see the discrepancies in the law. And there are many people. So I'll give you examples. If this law that was created, international law, the UN law, human rights, was truly for everybody, how many countries were still being colonized in 1945? Algeria, South Africa was still in apartheid. I'm sure you can think of many countries who did not gain independence till after 1945. So why was it okay for all those countries to still be colonized, while all Europe created these international laws? And then there were movements in the 50s and the 60s to take the international law that was created and try to interpret it in a way to protect those countries that were still colonized or who were coming out of colonization. And there was a huge struggle within the United Nations, within the international law community, to counter those voices. All right? And these voices were coming from the Arab world, because, like I said, Algeria was still colonized. Of course, Israel, Palestine, that's number one. I mean, Israel was created when the international law was created. South Africa was an apartheid when the international law was created, and that was okay. So this should make us all question this international law and the credibility of the international law. Not just that, when you look at all the countries that became independent, every contract that was with the colonizer, they were forced to keep, to abide by those contracts that were done under oppression. They were not equal contracts. Hence, you see, I'm sure you heard how France has the biggest storage of gold in the world. Yet it does not have one gold mine. So where did it get all the gold?
From
because
Africa?
From the countries it had colonized, and still taking them because of a contract that was signed 100 years ago with inequality. Even here in Turkey, there are contracts for the ships passing through the Bosphorus that were signed 100 years ago that the price can't change. And we still abide by these things. And we talk about fairness, international law, and equality and equity. So it's all a sham. So these are things we need to call out and talk about. And last thing I'm going to talk about politics, international law, is the creation of the nation state. Right? This is also a creation of the powers of colonialism. Even when they left our countries and we became independent, they made sure to leave us divided. Look at شبه الجزيرة العربية. I mean, Kuwait and Bahrain and Emirat and Qatar and Saudi. Look at Africa, the way they're disconnected. I mean, I went to Cameroon. Cameroon was half colonized by French and half colonized by British. And the people are fighting today. But which language should be the main language, French or English? Yani, and the tribes have their own languages. Okay, so they did this on purpose to divide us, to make us, and use all the natural resource we have. Not just that. The continuation of this. So nation states are artificial because it should, and this is a question to you. Can we imagine a world not with nations? Can we think of a new way of building the world, identifying the world, categorizing the world? One of the suggestions was, can we build the world on the concept of cities? Cities are ancient. Baghdad, Aleppo, Istanbul, Damascus, right? Cities are old and they have their own. Can we start building a new system that is not based on nation states so we can be free of all these artificial barriers that divide us instead of bringing us together? These are questions I'd love you to think about and explore as we go forward. But the other thing is, in the creation of these nation states, as the colonizer left, one of the most important things is that they made sure that there was lack of sovereignty over basic human needs. Example, crops. All African countries were encouraged not to plant food crops that they could feed their people. On the contrary, they were encouraged to plant crops that they could sell to the colonizer. So that the colonizer said, oh, you sell us the crops, we give you money. But they became dependent on the colonizer, or the former colonizer, for food, staple food for their people, whether it's wheat or corn or whatever staple food. So now if any country in Africa says, no, I don't like what you're doing, they just stop the food. And then people are dead. So sovereignty of food, of basic human rights, is something that the colonizer has taken from us, and we need to rethink how to bring it back. And because that's part of how you become independent from the West and colonizing. And of course, this brings into, just to mention, the IMF, right? Which is about increasing the debt of every country. If all West Europe really, really cared about Africa, all they have to do is just forgive all the debt. That's it. And all the debt was created because the West advanced because of what it took from Africa and other Asian countries. That's how it became advanced. So it's just about, okay, you don't want to give us back anything, just forget this debt that keeps increasing and increasing and increasing. But of course, for every point I'm saying, one could talk a whole lecture about. But I'm just giving you tidbits here and there to connect all these points together. Now, and so this leads me to the other point, which is identity and sense of belonging, right? When somebody asks me, where are you from, Rana? In the past, I used to say I'm Jordanian because I have a Jordan passport. But then, no, I'm Palestinian. I'm from Al-Quds. The Dajani family has been living in Al-Quds since the 11th century. All right, so I'm Palestinian. But then my mom is Syrian from Aleppo. So I'm Syrian, I'm Palestinian, I'm Jordanian. What am I, right? So who are we? And with these nation states, we've kind of, who are we? If you're from Pakistan or India, who are you? Are you the ones who left India, went to Pakistan, or are you the ones who from Pakistan went back to India, right? Who are we today? Bangladesh, all these different countries. So we need to really think, what is our identity? Who do we belong to? And what does that mean in how we function in this world? And in our priorities and in our values. So these are questions for you to think about and reflect. So how are we on time? I don't know.
You have, 10 minutes.
Oh, 10 minutes. Okay. So this brings me, all these questions is, I'm going to share a little bit of my story and tie it to what's happening today in Gaza as we go. I mean, to me, Gaza, of course, Palestine has been under colonization since 1948. And I've learned from Shahid, do not use the word ihtilal or occupation. Because occupation, ihtilal, international law means two countries are fighting over something. And that's not the case. What's happening in Palestine is colonization. And you need to call it that so that the international law can hold Israel accountable. Okay, so it's and I don't even like to use the word Israel. It's a colonial settler project. Not even giving them the name. Yeah, exactly. So it's been happening all along, as we know, the different intifadas, the different uprisings, etc. So we're not going to go back to history because everybody knows the history here. And for those who don't, they can go read all the books that are out there. But I'm going to talk about what happened in the past 2 years, since October 7. What happened in October 7 was a wake-up call for the whole world. And we know what happened after that, the unleashing of the genocide from the colonial settler project. But more importantly, we already knew they do that. That's not new. But what was really an eye-opener for the world is the complicity of Western governments and the United States, including with Israel. That was the eye-opener for the world, that suddenly international law doesn't work anymore. That it's for some but not others, right? And therefore the interpretation of this is the dehumanization of the Palestinian, of the global South for that matter. Who counts and who doesn't count? But the questions that kept coming to my mind is actually, and a long time ago, I used to think, why the question of Israel and what's going to happen in Palestine has always been central in Islam. It's always been central. And I used to think that why don't they talk about other atrocities, other fights around the world? But now I know why. Because Israel is the epitome of white supremacy and imperialism in today's world. And because a lot of people come to me and say, Rana, why are you so much about Palestine? What about Sudan? What about Congo? What about Myanmar? What about I say, yes, those are bad and those are atrocities. I'm not denying them. But the issue is that they are all manifestations of white supremacy and imperialism that is culminated today in what's happening in Palestine. If we stop the colonial settler project and we hold all complicit parties accountable, all the other problems will be solved. But to focus on the other problems or to clump all the problems together as one is actually a diversion from focusing on the root cause. And they want us to focus not on the root cause, to work on humanitarian aid. No? Again, another word which we all fell for. I'm one of them as well. Humanitarian aid, we use it in all our proposals, in all our words. Humanitarian aid is another colonial trick. So that we talk about, oh, okay, you need water, you need food. It's back to why we don't have water, why we don't have food, because we have a colonial settler project preventing it. And if I don't address those structural barriers, I'll never solve the problem. Actually, it's like being a hamster on a treadmill. You keep working with the water problem, but it never ends because you're not going upstream to look at the original reason why there's no water. And again, back to why Palestine and Israel. And it is connected to the white supremacist imperialism around the world. If you go back from World War II up to today, every country that tried to be independent and sovereign, if this conflicted with power and imperialistic project, those countries were not allowed to survive. Take all Latin America or South America. Every time there was a good person or a good group who was elected by the people, the US made a coup, removed them, and set them back 40 years backwards. And there's so much evidence about this. Same thing in Africa. Every good leader that was elected by the people was either assassinated or killed or couped through a revolution. And always to serve the colonial settler projects around the world. And if it wasn't the US doing that, it was Israel doing the work for them. And two books I encourage you to read. Andrew Lufenstein's book, The Palestine Laboratory. You should read it. This is a Jewish journalist who grew up in Chile. And his father was imprisoned by the Chilean coup, who later he found out was actually supported by the Israeli government. And they saved him and his mother to go to Israel after they had supported the coup to imprison his father. So when he went back to, when they were taken to Israel, he grew up, he started looking and asking questions, and he realized that Israel was behind the coup that actually took his father. And in his book, which came out last year, he documents how Israel is in control of all these coups. And if it's not the United States doing it, it's Israel doing it for the United States or other Western countries. And even the German chancellor recently said, it's Israel that does the dirty work for us. Quote. And it's all connected through weapons. If you look at the economy of Israel, how the stocks have gone up, because it's about exporting weapons and technology. So every country, most countries, are actually using Israeli technology, and hence they are held ransom or blackmailed through the Israeli control of their technology. Every country. So you may find maybe good politicians, but they tell you we can't do anything. All our data is controlled by Israel, so we can't do anything. All our army, all our military. We saw the pagers in Lebanon as an example. But read Palestinian Laboratories, because he elaborates on all of these, the research, the references, and he's a Jewish investigative journalist. Now here, I said, to make my point stronger, I told you he's a Jewish investigative journalist. Why do I have to do that? Why can't it be Rana saying it and people believe it? Why do I have to get proof or a witness from someone else? The argument is, oh, but people will believe you more when you say a Jewish person did it or a former Israeli did it. But it shouldn't be that way. Another book to read to learn more about that is Muhammad al-Kurd's The Perfect Victim. All right, this came out also recently. And in it, he argues, why do we always have to bring witness from the enemy or from a Jewish or from an Israeli to prove our point? Why isn't my word enough? Why isn't the word of a Palestinian enough? And he says, go to all the books. When they reference anything with Israel, if people want to believe it, it has to be either a Western resource or maybe a Palestinian who died a long time ago. Nobody alive today, because nobody's going to believe you. And that's bad, and that's sad. And we use it. I just did it now. When I said, you got to read Andrew Lowenstein's because he's Jewish, I'm sure you'll believe him more than me. That's wrong. That shouldn't be the case. So Muhammad al-Kurd's book is very important because he talks in detail about that and how to do it. So all this connectedness, technology is coming up more again and again. Artificial intelligence. Everybody's talking about AI, machine learning, the future of the world. What are we going to do? We know that the 5 companies that own all the data in the world, Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, what's the 5th one? Apple. Yeah. So those are the 5. And they control the whole world. And they used to claim that corporate was separate, technology was separate, but we see how they've lined up with Trump and paid their allegiances. We see how they have aligned with Israel, and they support Israel in everything. We don't have to go into detail about that. So this is a challenge. What's going to happen in the future? How do we combat that to go forward? In addition to the problem of jobs, who's going to take care of the jobs, and jobs are taken from the people, etc. But these are things for you to think. Sometimes it is exactly that. If jobs are being taken away by artificial intelligence and machine learning, and all this is controlled by 5 big companies, can we see in that a silver lining? For us to think, okay, so we have all these people who have all this time in the world to come up with something else, an alternative system. And we need an alternative system, not just for AI and technology and jobs, for the global world order. The UN is crumbling. So we need a new system. Universities, forget about that. We need a new system. So now is the time, as the world order is crumbling on every level, in every dimension, is for you, the youth, the future. You're all smart. You don't have to have a credential. You're smart because you're human. To come up with alternative ways to work the world. There's a saying that says, build a better mousetrap, mice will come to you. Oh, so let's come together. Let's think together. What alternative systems can we build? Most of the time when people used to talk about reimagining or building another system, everybody says, it's too difficult, the old system. But actually, it's crumbling. It's not working for us. We're already outside. We might as well come together and do something and stop depending on it. What does that mean? I don't want to use my Apple laptop, right? We shouldn't. I mean, I'm guilty. I have an Apple phone. But the question is, can we do something alternative? Do we have the courage? We have the brains. Do we have the courage? And in this, we need each other. Back to human traits, social. We need each other. We need to come together. We need to trust each other. Does that mean everybody's going to play the right game? No. You're going to find traitors. You're going to find people who you disagree with. Look at Palestine now. They'll tell you the people are disagreeing amongst themselves. So what do? Do we say, oh, it's never going to work? Yeah. And do you say we're going to fix them all? You can't. This is human nature. The question is to solve with the circumstances you are living today. So not you're going to fix everything. No, you have to solve with the challenges. Count them in the calculation. Count them in the plan. And then move forward. And that way, we will create a new world. Does that mean we're going to see it in our lifetime? Not necessarily, but that's okay. We have a proverb in Arabic, زرعوا فأكلنا نزرعوا فيأكلون. We plant, so our children eat, and our grandparents planted, so we eat. So we need to think long term. Again, evolutionary biology, long term. Look at white imperialism, supremacy. They've been working for a long time. The misconception in the media, the portrayal of Turkey in the media, right? It's backward, it's dirty. This is all media. What they talk about Arabs, what they talk about Muslims, all this is stereotyping in media. They've been working a long time. But we can work too, and we can plan too. Yeah, and they work to do harmful things, and they are ready to be cruel, which is against human nature. Our philosophy, our innate humanity is more merciful and more compassionate, and it will prevail on the long run. What does that mean? I've heard many movements are moving, and many initiatives are being created, and that's great. Is there one that's going to solve the problem? No. Probably it's many that will come. Some will progress more, some less, but that's like evolution, right? You have different paths until enough momentum happens to trigger the tipping point. I'm sure you've heard of the tipping point. Until we get the tipping point. But that means we all have to try. We all have to work. And from Islam, we draw the inspiration. You are not responsible for the results. In Islam, you are responsible for your intention and niyyah. And that's all. And then, can anybody judge your niyyah? Only Allah. So do your work. And we need to trust each other. If I see you doing something, maybe I don't know what you're doing, maybe I'm not sure, I need to trust you. Right? Because who am I to judge you? And when people, if I think they're not doing the right thing, I tell them, I trust that you are doing what you think is right today. Because I don't know your circumstances. Maybe you can't do something. So instead of pushing you away and judging you and shaming you, I say, I trust you. I know you're doing the right thing. Maybe I don't know what it is. And that's how we bring ourselves together to make a difference going forward. And this little things that we build, it's the chaos theory in physics. When a butterfly flutters its wings, it moves the wind a centimeter. The result is a hurricane beyond time and space, which is hadith al-Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. لا تحقرن من المعروف شيئا. You do little things, they will make a difference. And the other hadith, إذا قامت القيامة وبإيدك
يد أحدكم
فسيلة فازرعها. So not to give up, to have hope. And even in the most dire times like now, we need to have hope. And I'm going to end with acknowledging what's happening in Gaza. To me, Gaza reminded me of أصحاب الأخدود. Are you familiar with the story of أصحاب الأخدود? When the king, he had the magician, right? And the magician was growing old. So the king brought a young boy, a young man, and he said, I want you to go learn from the magician his tricks. So when the magician dies, you take his place. So this young man, as he was going to the magician, he saw a sheikh on the way, right? A wise person. We're translating into English. And he liked what this wise, pious man was saying more than the magician. So he would go tell the king, I'm late with the magician, and he would be spending time with the pious man. And if he was, and he'd tell the magician, I'm late with the king. Until the king discovered that this young man was learning everything from the pious man and did not learn anything from the magician. So the king says, I want to kill you. You're doing wrong. I want to kill you. So he tells his soldiers, take the young man and throw him in the sea. They go in the ship. There's a hurricane. The ship drowns. All the soldiers drown, and the young man comes back. And then he says, okay, he sends the soldiers. I mean, that's the story. He sends the soldiers, go to the top of the mountain, throw him off the top of the mountain. Earthquake, the soldiers fall, the young man comes back. And the king is furious, like, I want to get rid of you. What do I do? So the young man calmly says, I'll tell you how you can get rid of me. I'll tell you how you can kill me. You bring all the people of your kingdom in one place. You take a bow from an arrow from my arrows, and you say, Bismillah Rabbil Ghulam, and you pull the arrow, I will die. The king is overwhelmed. Okay, I'm going to do it. Alhamdulillah, finally. He gathers all the people. He takes the bow. He puts the young man. And he says, Bismillah Rabbil Ghulam. In English, in the name of the creator of the ghulam, meaning he's not the creator, that he could not kill the young man by himself. He could only create it when he asked for help from the creator. He killed him. Now the ghulam died. That's sad. You think, oh my God, was it worth it? It was. Because what happened to all the people? They believed. And to me, this is Gaza. The people of Gaza have sacrificed. They are the ghulam. They died. They're being killed. But it was worth it. Those who orchestrated what happened had a vision, were wise, or it is Allah's work. It's always Allah's work, of course. It woke up the whole world. It's like all the people now see Israel and the colonial settler, and not just Israel. The important thing is they saw the connection with all the imperialism and the white supremacy around the world. That is what's different this time than all the other times in the past. And that is what, so Gaza is like the ghulam. That's my kind of way of looking at the story. And the people woke up. And now what's happening in the story of Ashab al-Ukhdud, what does the king do? He digs trenches, right? And he starts throwing the people and the believers in the trenches. And then we know the famous story of the woman with her baby, and she's afraid to throw herself. And the baby says, no, my mother, you are ala haq, you are on the right path. And so she throws herself. To me, this is us, right? We are being tested today. Are we ready to sacrifice? After the Ghulam sacrificed, Gaza sacrificed, it's our turn. Are we ready? And if we believe that we are on the truth, we should be ready and keep going and not to be afraid except from Allah. Life is short. This is our part of contributing to what's happening in the world. And we can elaborate with the Q&A on what does that mean? What do we do? Because I hate to leave a place where somebody tells me, gets me all excited, and then I go, okay, so what do I do now, right? No, we're not going to let you go that way. We're going to tell you, at least give some advice, and then hear from you of what can we do today. Concrete, practical, real-time action items that you can actually do.